what was the difference between this old table and the new table? And so then he came up with this idea of the very first drop headpiece. Right, and then from there, he went on to develop the full spine tables.
Well, hello, everybody. Dr. Ron Oberstein, president of Life Chiropractic College West, and welcome to another edition of our Life West Leadership Line. Today, I've got an amazing chiropractor as our guest, coming to us all the way from Muscatine, Iowa, right? Very close to Davenport, but Muscatine, Iowa is Dr. Beth Zogg. So, Beth, welcome to the Life West Leadership Line.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We're excited. We're going to have some really good conversation. I'll just tell our viewers a little bit about Dr. Beth. She graduated from Life University in 1995. She stayed at Life for a few years teaching and had kids and did the whole route of course, growing up, as we would say, right? That kind of thing. She ended up moving back to Muscatine. This is her hometown of where she grew up. She is the ICA rep for the state of Iowa. She's also the president of the J Clay Thompson Foundation. And I will share this with you that she is the granddaughter of Dr. J Clay Thompson, who developed the Thompson Technique. And she's keeping, Dr. Thompson, you're keeping your grandfather's legacy going, obviously, which we will get into. And she's been in chiropractic for many years. And she's just, grew up in chiropractic. Grandfather was a chiropractor and grew up around probably some of the greats. I don't even know. Maybe you sat on BJ's knee at one time. Who knows? We'll get into it. But please welcome, because we're going to get into this and be able to start talking about, Beth, we're talking about where you're from and what you're doing and all that stuff. So I'm so excited to have you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Let's talk. I don't know if you know this or not, but I met your grandfather when I was at school. I graduated in 81, so he would be around quite a bit because him and Dr. Williams became very close. And he spent a lot of time in the halls and on the grounds of Life Chiropractic College back then, right? And his technique is truly just amazing. But a lot of people don't know the legacy about your grandpa. They don't know, the brain behind the technique, right? The engineering brain and all the things that he did. Let's talk about that, if you would, because I think it's important for people to know.
Yeah, sure. Well, some of the viewers may not realize that my grandfather got into chiropractic because chiropractic saved his life. And when he was in his 20s, he had an injury at work and he developed acute onset diabetes and was just, ready to die until he saw a chiropractor. He got adjusted for 16 days and then he was completely cured from that. And so about 10 years later, he started chiropractic college. Well, my grandfather's background was that he, as a child, worked in a machine shop. So he, as a young boy, learned how to use all of the equipment and learned, had a kind of a good mechanical background before he ever even got to high school. And then he also took a lot of engineering classes, like what they called back then correspondence, which was the old time version of online classes, I guess. And so by the time he started school at Palmer, he already had a really good mechanical background in engineering, knowledge. So at that time, when he started chiropractic school, the technique was just HIO, just adjusting C1, C2 on a side posture table with a stationary headpiece. And right away, he noticed that there needed to be some updating in the equipment. And through just giving his first adjustment and feeling all that force coming back at him, he came up with this idea of a drop mechanism. And it's kind of interesting because in those days at Palmer, the students could actually start a little tiny practice in their homes before they graduated.
Really?
And so he bought this old rickety table from a graduating student, kind of a homemade table. And this table, because it was so worn out, the headpiece would give way a little bit when he gave his adjustment. And so as soon as he saved up money and he got a brand new side posture table, he noticed that he wasn't getting the same results and the patients were complaining that the adjustment was more painful. And so that was kind of what led him down the road, like, what was the difference between this old table and the new table? And so then he came up with this idea of the very first drop headpiece.
Right,
and then
right.
from there, he went on to develop the full spine table. So it's kind of, would have said it was developed out of necessity.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about it is that so many people think that everything is premeditated in life. Like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do, but truthfully, probably a majority of the stuff that happens in inventions, at least, it's by default, not by design, right? Like all of a sudden he had a broken table and his patients were getting better results than the standard table. And so he went back to the broken table, but then redesigned that into it's just so cool how this stuff happens. And I never knew that story, and it's just amazing because I know that your grandpa, I know that Dr. Thompson was, his technique was really well thought out. If anyone knows anything about Thompson Technique, it's very precise, and it's well thought out. It's not like super complicated, and yet it gets phenomenal results. And there is a process to it, and it makes sense, which I think brings to the practitioner more competence and more confidence, right? And we all know that, in chiropractic, it's not just the adjustment, it's the intention behind the adjustment, right? And it's just so beautiful. So I had no idea, but I will tell you this, at the Life College, when I was graduated in 1981, even in 1980, like I said, your grandpa was walking around. It was like, and he was teaching there to his technique and doing things and working with Dr. Sid Williams, whatever they were brainstorming and concocting, I don't know, but it was below my pay grade. But what I do remember, he was impeccably dressed.
Oh, yes.
And he just held this stature of, he was a very just straight posture, lean man, and he just held this posture of and this presence of this man is something, he is something. And I just got to share that with you because I had lunches and things with him, but he was just an amazing man.
Yeah. When I think back of all the chiropractors that I've met over the years, it seemed like my grandfather and Dr. Russ Earhart could get by with wearing like any color, any kind of fancy suit, and they both had some really like, exotic like silk suits and really custom made stuff. But yeah, he loved nice clothes.
Yeah, and they could pull it off,
They could. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the strong connection between my grandfather and Dr. Sid, and how Dr. Sid really brought my grandpa out of a Great Depression. Do you know this story?
No, please tell it.
Well, of course, my grandfather had Dr. Sid and Dee Dee Umber and the gang as students at Palmer. And when BJ died in 1961, then it was really a hard time for chiropractic and for my grandfather too. And so he was let go from teaching at Palmer. And so my grandpa really kind of went into a deep depression. He was still practicing, but his entire life had revolved around BJ, around Palmer School. And so as my grandfather was just in practice, he kind of lost his spiz.
Yeah.
And so about that time, speaking of Dr. Earhart, Dr. Russ Earhart said, Clay, I'm going to go down and I'm doing a talk in Atlanta at this thing called Dynamic Essential. Why don't you just come along with me? I'll give you some of my time and you can teach your work. And, I just think it'd be good for you to get out and do a little teaching again. And so my grandfather went down with Dr. Earhart. And as he sat and he listened to Dr. Sid, talk about our philosophy, he got his spiz back. And that's when my grandfather then became a regular speaker at DE. Dr. Sid helped get, a lot of my grandfather's tables sold. And so our family owes so much to Dr. Sid, to Life College, to DE, because I really don't know what would have happened, with the technique if it weren't for Dr. Sid.
Right. That's a beautiful story too, because, as being around DE is that Dr. Sid went into, depressions and had, when they burned his clinic down, there were times that he'd be in bed for 3-4 months, and it took everything for Dr. Nell to even get him up and feed him. And, it's like great men great men, at some point, everybody can only carry so much weight, right? And then you need someone else to kind of, correct that subluxation above Atlas, so to speak, right? Yeah, and it's just amazing because your grandfather was he was teaching. He would come and teach the techniques, and he was just doing amazing things at Life University. This was back in the early '80s and
Right.
or in late '70s, I should say. He's just an amazing man. The legacy, of your grandfather. I mean, obviously he got involved. Who was making the terminal point table, the Thompson terminal?
William. Well, at that time it was William Manufacturing. Now it's Williams Healthcare Systems,
Yeah.
and they still are the manufacturer of the table, and they create such a great product. I mean, that's top notch drop table.
Yeah, and then I remember when the compressors used to be on the floor in the corner, and there'd be this loud. You think like you're in a auto mechanic shop where with the air coming through, and then they put it in the ceiling, and all that. And now it's to the point where they're incredible tables. Once you start using a table like that, doing Thompson work or any other work, it's like it's like driving a Cadillac, right? Just it's incredible. Talk to us about the foundation. So the purpose of the foundation, obviously, is to keep the work going, of your grandpa. What's been, how's it doing? How can people, get involved with it or learn more about it?
Yeah. Well, we kind of revamped the foundation about 3 years ago, and we have a wonderful board of directors. And so our mission is to obviously preserve the technique. We plan on doing many, many free seminars and things for chiropractic students. And we try to do at least one big free class a year for chiropractic students. We give out free technique manuals. And so we really are trying to just give back to the chiropractic students, because this is the time, and when they're really learning so much, they start to develop an interest in this thing or that thing. And so we try to give back quite a bit to the different Thompson clubs at the campuses. You guys actually have a good Thompson club going at Life West, so thank you. And then our hope is to, get enough funds to start doing more research in chiropractic. And so, we want to do more than just help the Thompson technique. We want to really contribute to chiropractic as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think your grandfather epitomized it, because he came out of an upper cervical background and went to full spine, but never left the upper cervical world, right? Because he always, held the upper cervical world as being super important. That's why it's still important in the technique. But I love it because it really is about chiropractic. It's not about any specific technique. It's about every specific technique still leads to chiropractic, right? Up here, because we know all techniques work, right? And people gravitate toward what feels right for them or works better for them as that practitioner. One of the things I want to talk to you about, because I know this, I know that you got really deep into instrumentation, right? And thermography and things like that. Where did that interest start? And what have you seen the growth of thermography or other instrumentation also?
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the blessings of having Clay Thompson as your grandpa is you get to meet all of his awesome friends. And so one of those friends was Dr. Glenn Stillwagon of the Pierce Stillwagon technique. And so after my grandpa passed away, I would say Dr. Stillwagon was my main mentor for a time. And so he really taught me a lot about the neuropathophysiology of vertebral subluxation and how that, relates to your practice and patient care before and after adjustment. And so, I would say that because of Dr. Stillwagon, really, I have this passion for thermography. And so I actually taught the thermography class at Life when I was there. That was a course that Dr. Stillwagon really put together, along with another great chiropractor, Dr. Pincus Neumann. Mm-hmm. And so I still do teach classes on thermography periodically. I would love to see thermography be like its own course in all of the chiropractic colleges, because I think there's some confusion as to how to use it. And some of the colleges don't talk about it at all, And so, there's some great instruments out there right now. I mean, I think and I don't get any payback for this at all, but I do think that the Titron instrument is a very, very good one, because whether you want to do pattern work or if you want to use it more like a DTG, like a single probe, it's very, very versatile.
Right.
But yeah, through my time, at Life, we used the single probe instrument. Then I had Dr. Stillwagon's Visitherm, which was really a wonderful instrument. And of course, you can even get camera systems now, which are becoming more and more affordable, which give you the whole picture. So I think that the use of an objective measure like thermography keeps the chiropractor on track, because if you don't have any objective measure, then it's easy to get caught up in just going by patient symptom.
Yeah.
And we don't want to go by symptom. I mean, we tell patients come in and get checked, even if you don't have any pain or this or that. And so we need to have something to show us before and after. Do we adjust the right thing at the right time in the right place? And so I love it in terms of keeping the chiropractor on track, but also it's a great tool for educating patients that, what we're dealing with is the nerve system, educate them on innate intelligence, get them out of that pain focus and symptom focus.
Yeah, and when you give them something to shoot for, when they can actually see something visibly, whether it's a graph or whether it's a model. I know, we use the Titron for many years, right? And it's still in our practice in San Diego. My wife started doing upper cervical work at one point. She started doing knee chest work, and the group that she learned from, Bill Amalu and Louis Tiscarino up in San Francisco, they were the first ones to start using. They weren't the first ones to start using Titron, but they used it on the West Coast. And so we got one, right? And here we are. We're using it, but you could do so much with it. I mean, it was incredible. And I'll tell you a cute story. This is pretty interesting. Or you might know this. I don't know. Well, Roger Titron lives in Iowa, right?
Yes, I know him.
Yeah, and so here this is a story he tells me. He goes, yeah. I go, Roger, how'd you make this thing? Like what? He goes, well, I was driving over to Davenport getting checked out. Who was checking him in Davenport? Was it Crowder or?
Oh, it might have been Bud Crowder.
It was somebody, Dr. Crowder or maybe Galen Price. I don't know, but whoever was checking him, they were using this thermography that was more like the Kale, more like just on the skin. And he kept saying, there's got to be a better way. And he's an engineer. Mm-hmm. And so he literally built the Titron for himself, and not for himself, but he did it so that to give better care. Right. And he would have never done it if it wasn't a patient. This guy, Roger, was bringing van loads every time he came to Davenport every month to get checked. Under his upper cervical care, he would have a van load of people. I think he's in Iowa City, right? And
near Iowa City.
Tiffin. And he would come and he would do that. And it was just incredible, how this happened, And here I am, I'm talking with Roger, right? And I have the Titron, and some guy comes into my office, to show me an EMG. And his name's David Markarian. And he looks over at the Titron and goes, what's that? And I said, oh, that's thermography. He goes, who makes that? And I said, a guy named Roger Titron. He said, could you introduce me? And I go, yeah. So I called Roger and I introduced them. And I didn't know David, but I just introduced them. And next thing you know, new software was developed and all this other stuff, and just great stuff. I do want to share one thing with you that I think is really cool, which you probably don't know, but I think you'll be excited about. We are right now, like as we talk right now, we are building a technology lab at Life West. And we have a lot of the equipment already in there, but it's just by the end of this month, which is next week, I think, it'll be completely finished, where we have thermography, where we have SEMGs, where we have DTGs, where we have, all kinds, anything that has to do with chiropractic, right? We have force plate tables that you can adjust on that can read you've seen those before. All these different things that are in there, so that our students can be exposed to everything. And
incredible.
And be able to go in there, work. We have a full-time technology lab. It's a chiropractor who runs it. And this, because I agree with you. We need so many objective measures in chiropractic, right? And I don't know if you know this, but one of the reasons people weren't doing objective measures before was because if they didn't get results, they didn't want to show the patient, right? And that's pretty poor reason, right?
It happens to me. It happens to me. I'll adjust somebody. We'll go back and run the scan, and the scan is worse, and the patient sees it, and then I'm like, okay, let's get you back on the table. I have to figure out what I missed. I may have to use a different analysis, a different technique until I get it right. And so it is humbling for sure, but it's a way for you to give the patient the best possible care.
Yeah. And the patients, I think they appreciate it. They're not looking for us to hit hole in ones every single time we adjust them. They want to know, am I changing? If I'm not changing, good. As long as we keep working toward it, And like you said earlier, it's not about pain. It's really about objective measures. And sometimes the body isn't going to clear on every adjustment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like it in terms of setting up a care plan, because I'm really not a big fan of just like every patient 3 times a week for 3 weeks, 2 times a week for whatever weeks. I'm not a fan of that, because we know everybody's responds to care differently at different rates. And so with the thermography, you can really gauge, how fast are they improving? Some people may need to come more often. Some people may need to only come once a month. I mean, it just depends on how they respond to care, how long they hold their adjustment. So it really allows you to individualize care, which I think is patients appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Beth, are you teaching, like right now, obviously, Thompson Technique, there's a foundation, you're teaching the technique and having it go and they're doing, is there a I don't know, a course, over the period of 6 months or a year that docs can do to become, is there a certification? What's it look like in the Thompson world right now?
Yeah, we have a list of certified instructors, and those instructors, I mean, we support them and promote them, but they all work sort of independently. And so in order to get certified in the Thompson Technique, the foundation just asks that the students take a 36-hour program. So most of the time that's 3 weekends, 12-hour classes. And then the instructor, whoever that is, will offer a written test and a practical exam that has to have an 80% pass rate. And we do have instructors that are teaching those certification courses all over the world. We got slowed down a little bit with COVID and that. And so some of our instructors over like Europe, New Zealand, Australia have been kind of slowed down a bit. But we hope in the year to come that we can get everybody back up and running.
Right. Is anything online now, of the coursework?
We do teach we do have some online classes, and we're working on perfecting those. That's of course new to us, just like everyone.
Yeah.
But I foresee in 2023 that we will offer online certification courses as well. Those are a little bit tougher, just because it's a technique. It's kind of like they have to have their camera on, and we have to be able to see what they're doing and all of that. But yeah, but I foresee that we will be offering those in the future as well. And then, I do have a couple classes offered through you guys, through Life West. So thank you for that as well. But I mean, we have a variety of instructors. We have a huge growth in instructors and students getting certified in Latin America, which is very exciting. Mm-hmm. And so we hope to, get good instructors all over the world, so that we're not always having to fly someone from the United States to teach in another country. So that's our goal, is to have certified instructors from different places, and they can teach to their own countrymen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. It's a great, that is a sustainable model, right? To be able to have it keep growing like that. I want to jump into research, because, mentioned about, funding research and doing research. Anything on the table, or even in your mind, that you're looking at for research that you want to, a project that you're looking at that's exciting to you?
Yeah, one of our board members, Dr. Greg Demetrius, he has a lot of ideas with research in terms of trauma, like automobile trauma, whiplash trauma. So that's one of our projects that he would be working on. I have just great interest in, showing the pre and post just adjustment changes with, thermography, maybe EMG, different things like that, to dive a little bit deeper into validating just vertebral subluxation, since we have those in our midst that deny the existence of that. And, we have some good research being done in Chile with some of our instructors on the leg check analysis, because so much of our technique was researched back in the 40s and 50s with the best technology at that time. but we need to update some of those studies because we get people, contacting us saying, well, where's your latest research on this or that with regards to the technique? So some of that just laying the foundations of what we're doing and showing that it actually impacts the nerve system. And, hopefully we'll get some new ideas from people of research, just, basic chiropractic research, showing how chiropractic care affects the nerve system and how that could impact the entire person.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I just want to invite you to just think about it. But I think it'd be a very cool thing if you wanted to do some research with Life West. I'm just thinking right now, we've got research scholars. These are students who are interested in doing research. And, we're only doing vitalistic or biomarker research. Like we're just completing research on telomeres. They had to be under chiropractic care for over 30 years, right? To be participate, right? And then, we had a phlebotomist draw blood. It got sent out to Pennsylvania. Then it goes to like somewhere in Europe, gets spun down, and we're going to test it against people, same age, same sex, same gender, but not under chiropractic care, right? And really be able to see how does chiropractic stack up on a biological age level, right? But I'm thinking the leg check would be a beautiful thing for us to do, even for students to do. I mean, they've got so many subjects at the college that they could be working with, and it could be a really cool thing. So I'm just sticking a little bug in your ear.
Well, thank you.
That maybe it might be something that we want to talk about. There's something else I want to just kind of share, and I just want to ask you because, obviously you started the conversation talking about your technique, but also about sometimes you don't get changes with Thompson and you go to a different technique. And I have to tell you, it's so refreshing, and the only reason I say it's refreshing is because I come from a very jaded place. Back in the late 70s or early 80s, it was like, this is my technique and this is what works, and everyone else, doesn't, or it doesn't work as good kind of thing. Right. And there was a lot of ego, and I get it because, in those days we were growing, technique was coming out, all kinds of things were starting. And I appreciate that they had that attitude because it made them even push their technique further. Right. But obviously it's changing now because we know that, there's a lot of techniques that work. And you even said that. That tells me that probably one of the most important things for you is not just the technique, right? It's something else. And I'm just going to ask you, what is that something else?
Well, I mean, that something else is the chiropractor provides a force that innate intelligence takes and corrects the subluxation. I mean, that's what it's about. There's many different ways to do that. But I have this old paper that was written by Dr. Herb Hender, who was the dean under BJ Palmer. Yeah. And basically the paper was saying, that chiropractic grew the most in the early years when chiropractors had the least amount of education, the most primitive equipment, and the most primitive adjusting techniques. And yet sick people got well and chiropractic grew immensely. And so, the focus shouldn't necessarily be on this technique's better than that technique, but more so in connecting that brain cell to tissue cell, turning that power back on. That is the most important thing, regardless of however you choose to do it. And, my grandpa always said, no technique is good for every patient all the time. Yeah. And that includes his own technique. And so he always encouraged students and doctors to learn several techniques, maybe pick 3 techniques that you really learn well, so that no matter who comes in your office, you've got some tool to use to help them. And if you can't help them, then send them down the road to your buddy that does something else. And so it's not about ego at all. It's about the patient and, the focus. The thing that really binds us and the focus really should always be our philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing that. And I think that's so important. And coming from someone who's promoting, a technique, right? Your grandpa's technique, Thompson Technique. It's just great to hear because it is. I mean, innate takes the force. We're not that good, we're not as good as innate. Innate knows. We just put the force in. Well, Beth, thank you. I mean, I so appreciate you being on with us today, and I appreciate just having this opportunity to sit down and talk with you. I just want to keep supporting you in the work that you're doing, and Life West is always here for you. But I want our listeners to know that no matter what technique you're in, it doesn't matter. It's really more about learning and becoming better. I told a group of chiropractors recently that if you're not doing 2 technique seminars a year, I don't care what they are. It could be the technique that you're involved in. But if you're not doing 2 technique seminars a year, I'd have to question whether I want to get adjusted by you, because it's really about us becoming better and better and better at what we do. We don't necessarily always get better. We get better, by working on people, but we have to have that input coming into us to see what's the jewel that I can pick up, today and be able to work that. And I just want to share that you dropped a bunch of really nice jewels today, on our talk. And I thank you for that. I do want you to know that I'm going to send you a tape unless you already have it. I've got an old tape of, I think it's now converted into digital, of Herb Hender. It's called Change Thinking Changes Everything.
Oh, thank you.
So if you don't have it, I'm going to get it to you. I'll download it to you when I'm back at the college. But it's really and it's just Dr. Hender talking. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that I had the opportunity. I was saving this to the end. I had the opportunity to get adjusted by your grandfather.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. And I have to tell you that, there's probably been 3 or 4 people that I've had adjustments from that historically that really changed my life. And I'm not talking about symptomatically. I'm talking about changed me as a chiropractor, right? My confidence and competence level in my brain. Your grandpa was one, Herbert Ross Reaver was another.
Wow.
And the similarity between these chiropractors, what Dr. Sid was one, and the similarities between these chiropractors, it wasn't their technique. It was them getting themselves out of the way and being masters at what they did, but getting themselves out of the way so that they can just allow the body to do what it had to do. And they own that. So, and you said that today. So thank you. I had a great time with you, and I appreciate you and all the work you're doing. And to our viewers, thank you. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for coming back week after week. We drop these Life West leadership lines every other week, the opposite weeks. We do the Life by Life West with myself and my wife, Dr. Mary. We just appreciate it. Please share this with your friends. And that's why we're growing so much. And that's why we've got so many people watching these. It's because of you sharing them and letting people know. There's probably 4 chiropractors right now in your sphere that are thinking about their technique or want to get better. This is what they have to hear. So if you will share that, I would appreciate it, because we're not sharing it for us. We're sharing it for humanity. And we really want to see people get unsubluxated on this planet and have more chiropractors doing great work. So thank you. Until we come again at you in another couple of weeks, just know that I love and appreciate you. From Dr. Beth and myself, we'll bid you adieu, and keep loving those around you and keep telling the story about chiropractic.